Hi everyone, Colin here and welcome back to an aquarium video discussing Undergravel filters. And yes, I do still use one. Recently I swapped out my inert gravel that had been there for about 25 years for some active substrate, which is a baked clay granule called black earth. There's various other types you can use as well. And I did a rescape for my tank to try and get even better plant growth than what I normally used to get, which was pretty good. Now, the Undergravel Filter tray is the first thing on the base glass of the tank, and the substrate then covers that tray all together. Now, Undergravel filters come in different types, and the type that I'm using is specifically for growing plants. And it doesn't have any bubbles. It has a water pump that actually blows water from the top of the uplift down the uplift under the substrate, and the amount of water going under the substrate is a very tiny little trickle, and that water flow rate is so slow it's just to get warm oxygenated water under the very base of the substrate, so the substrate never goes anaerobic. But the substrate has such a little amount of water flowing underneath it that the substrate is always anoxic, and that means it's always very low in oxygen. Now, plant roots have to grow in an anoxic environment. The nutrients they pull in through the roots have to be in a reduced chemical state, and that normally means that the oxygen has been stripped from the molecule, making the molecules smaller. And these smaller reduced molecules can literally fit through the semi-permeable membrane of the roots. This is what happens in nature. In nature, roots are always in mud, which is very low in oxygen, and that's just what nature's used to doing. So plants are used to growing with their roots in soil, in mud, very, very low in oxygen. And the organisms that share that environment, various fungus, various bacteria, they all require that anoxic, low oxygen condition in order to function. And as you can see here, underneath the substrate, these roots are threading their way every single where through this active substrate looking for nutrients. They're very happy, they're going very well, and they're spreading an enormous mat of roots right throughout that base material. And that means that as fish waste drops from the water column anywhere in the tank, the entire tank is a filter. So it doesn't matter where that fish poop drops, there are organisms that are going to actually break that waste down naturally as a compost and detoxify that waste so it's not a health hazard to the fish. And as you can see, the plants utilise it as fertiliser, and everyone's very happy. So the water column is very, very aerobic, it's very high in oxygen, but the substrate is different, it's very low in oxygen. And for plants, it needs to be very low in oxygen in order for plants to do well. So this tank is a planted tank with fish, which has got an Undergravel filter tray as a part of the system. So it's not true to say that Undergravel filters are an old technology that's had its day. They're just as useful today as they ever were, and it depends on how you want to use them. So they can be used at a very high flow rate with water pumps or with air pumps for fish only tanks. Obviously, when it runs in that particular setup, it means that you must be doing gravel vacuums to pull excessive organic buildup out of the tank to keep your nitrates and phosphates under control. So in fish only aquariums, as a very low cost means of filtration, they're still very effective and very good to use today. but with regular maintenance so that the dirt doesn't get out of control and become unhealthy. In a planted tank such as this, we're running it in a different way entirely. We're running water which has been filtered, which has been heated, which has been blown underneath the substrate in a very small trickle to prevent anaerobic conditions developing. So for the long term of the tank, this tank will not, over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, will never go anaerobic. The plants will always do well. I just have to make sure I trim them and move them about so I can still see the fish. So undergravel filters are still a pretty useful part of this hobby. So thanks for watching. I hope your tanks are going well. Until the next video, all the very best to you.